Good evening and welcome to Chris 180's Candid Conversations series. I'm Chandra Luckett, your host and the Chief Marketing Officer here at Chris 180. Today we're talking about a really important subject that has grabbed the attention of headlines across the country, especially this September. We're talking about suicide. Did you know that just last year, every 11 minutes, a person died by suicide? And the number of people who say that they think about suicide is even higher. Needless to say, it is a problem that continues to impact everyone around the country and right here in Georgia. But what can each of us do to help save a life? That's the question everyone always wants to know. So this Suicide Prevention Month, we are here with two of our experts to give some maybe helpful hints around what each of us can do to save a life. Thrilled to introduce our panelists today, our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Mena, and our VP of Mental Health and Wellness, Ashleigh Dennis-Silas. Ladies, take it away.
Thank you for that warm welcome. So let's just jump right in. Suicide. That is an uncomfortable topic. Nobody really wants to talk about it, but we have to get comfortable talking about uncomfortable topics, especially if it's going to save a life. But why do you think people aren't talking about it?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons that people aren't talking about it, starting with what you just said. It's uncomfortable. Yeah. There is a stigma that if we talk about it, it encourages people to who have suicidal thoughts to go through with plans. People believe that talking about it, maybe it creates stigma even in their own communities. Boy, am I crazy? Are other people not experiencing this?
Yeah.
So I think it's so important to have this conversation, really to normalize the experience of having these types of thoughts, and certainly to encourage people to support one another, to talk about ways to get support. So we have to start talking about it in order to really start to address it.
Right, and that word normalizing it, that's the key, because it's really easy to talk about, I have a migraine, I have diabetes, I have high blood pressure. That's a very normal topic to talk about. But suicide, depressed, I want to take my life, we have to have that be something that people are comfortable talking about so that they can get help. Because if they're not wanting to talk about it or feel uncomfortable talking about it, then they're not getting the help, and then that's when people take their lives, when they are feeling alone or feeling like they're a burden to family. So I definitely agree with that.
Absolutely. So I think it's important to talk about how common this is. Can you talk about that a little bit?
It's very common. Up to 50,000 people took their lives in 2021 alone, the CDC says. So that's a lot of people. And in fact, yesterday was National Physician Suicide Awareness Day, and about 400 physicians take their lives in a given year. So it affects anybody, everybody, race, gender, age,
and I think
matter.
To that point, some months ago there was a lot of talk about even pastors who are dealing with suicidal ideation and suicide attempts and completions. So to that point of, it is every spectrum of our aspect of our society that you can think about. Even the people that we look to for support are also people who are needing support around this topic. One of the things that I thought is interesting is when we start to look at risk factors, certainly things like history of suicide attempts or mental health disorders, depression, anxiety, family history are things that come up. But I think it's also important, things like job loss, financial stress,
divorce,
death, so isolation. People who don't have social connection. So there's some of these things that are so common to everybody that can impact
social connection.
Yeah.
And as we talked about, you said pastors, physicians, so people who are caretakers, maybe that compassion fatigue or that stretch of giving them their all to others, that probably makes a burden for them and makes them develop depression in some way. So, those who are caregivers or caretakers or in the service field, they need to make sure they're seeing someone as well.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I know we hear this topic of self-care so much. I think almost to the point of maybe we're not paying as much attention because we hear the topic self-care so much. But I like to talk about self-compassion. Right? So thinking about treating yourself with the same kindness that you would treat other people. Right? So if I was saying or someone else was saying to me, Ashleigh, I'm tired. I don't have support. I feel lonely. I feel hopeless. I don't know what I'm going to do in this situation. What counsel or advice would I give that person? Which is a lot of times different than what we say to ourselves. To ourselves, we say, suck it up, you can do it, it'll be okay, you've got to do it. We tell ourselves to keep going.
And we usually tell others, get that help, take that break, say no, have boundaries.
Yes.
Make sure you're taking care of yourself, that self-care. We tell them that, but you're right that when it's ourselves, then we're like, well, suck it up, we gotta put everyone else first, but that's not what we should do. Self-care is not selfless. It's not selfish.
Yes.
It's selfless. Because if you're taking care of yourself, you're taking care of everybody else.
Right. There's a wonderful quote that says, you can't give yourself to other people if you don't have a self to give.
Yeah.
And so it's that same thing that we hear so much about, putting your oxygen mask on first.
Yes, that's my favorite example to give. Yeah, you put an oxygen mask on everybody else, and by the time you get to yourself, you pass out. It's too late. And that's the case with self-care, taking care of yourself, getting a therapist, whatever you need for your mental health.
And so you just kind of touched on my favorite thing. Can we talk about having a therapist?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely important. And a lot of people say, well, I've had a therapist, it didn't go well. I don't think therapy's for me. But finding a therapist is just like dating, right?
I love that.
You're not going to just date one person, it doesn't work out, and then, I'm not going to date again. You keep dating, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
Therapists are humans. We just said that. So if it doesn't work out with the first therapist, the second, third, fourth, fifth, you still can find another therapist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important to have a therapist to do exactly what you're saying. And people can look into different types of therapies. People have different approaches to therapy, and really find what feels good to you, a person that connects with you. Some people are very technical in their approach. Some people are more conversational. And so if you find that you're looking for a therapist and this doesn't feel good to you, exactly your point, keep trying. And another thing, sometimes people think that formal individual therapy is the only thing that they can connect to. So can you talk about other types of therapies?
Yeah, there's definitely different therapies. And just for you to say the conversational piece, a lot of people do say, oh, I talk to them, it's kind of like a friend, but there's actually more to that. There's the different modalities of therapy that you're alluding to. So cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and those in particular definitely get to those dark thoughts that we have in depression. With depression and suicidal thoughts, you get those thought traps, and you're I'm a burden to other people, and just different things. But when it comes to cognitive behavioral therapy and that actual therapy that you need that's not conversational therapy, you're learning how to reframe your thoughts and how to love yourself and how to have positive affirmations about yourself.
Or even the idea of a conversation with purpose, right? This conversation has a specific intent. It's going somewhere. So even if you don't know that this person is intentional in the direction of the conversation, and that's something I think we can talk about with our therapist. We can say, hey, this doesn't feel good, or this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I think that's an important part of the conversation too, to talk about what your expectations are in therapy, and really to try and find the modality that makes sense for you, that feels good for you. And then the other piece of that, so individual therapies and things like
family therapy, parent management therapy if you need it, couples therapy. There's different kinds of therapy, that's for sure.
Right. And even sometimes I've found that people like groups. So sometimes group is a great way to get in there, to the point that we started at the top around normalizing. Sometimes it's great, even if you're not ready to have a conversation, to be able to go into a group, to hear other people, see how it goes when they share, to experience that support, that sense of community, which is, again, one of those protective factors. So we talked about risk factors, but there's also protective factors. And so social connectedness is a huge protective factor. And even if that comes in the form of group therapy, if that comes with a great family system, that can be connection to a faith-based community.
Religious institution, church, a lot of people say that that's a protective factor.
Community centers, sports, absolutely. I heard a parent talking the other day about connecting with other moms. And how just to hear other moms talk about being in the fight.
Yeah,
So to
exactly.
speak.
Just to be able to relate and understand and be able to vent. But like we talk a lot about therapy. How do we get someone to therapy? What if they just don't want to go at all?
Yeah, I think this is a great place to start to talk about our QPR, what we are having here at Chris 180. So QPR, question, persuade, refer,
yes.
Is a nationally recognized program that helps us to teach people how to talk about engaging with service providers around suicide.
Exactly.
And how do we
or
talk to
anybody,
people?
not
Yeah.
even just providers. Any individual can take this training. If you think about it, CPR, a lot of people recognize what that is. If someone falls out, cardiac arrest, you just give them the CPR. QPR is similar to that, but if someone talks about wanting to die,
that's
apply
a great connection. And this training is so wonderful because it helps you, just like CPR gives you the tools and the steps to intervene in a medical emergency. This gives you those tools. It gives you questions to ask. It helps you to become comfortable with listening and sitting with people who are dealing with suicidal ideation, and then to support them in getting connected to service providers, to professionals who can take it the next step.
And it's only 1 hour and it's free. So unlike CPR, which is probably about 8 hours of training.
A great point to make. So if people are interested, if they want to connect with this, our website, chris180.org/QPR, all of the information about the training, how to get connected to it, and to just prepare yourself to be able to save a life.
Yeah, because it's okay to ask them if you notice that they're down or things have changed, they're sleeping in or isolating themselves, not able to make it to work, or sometimes, these are more of the risk factors. It's okay to ask, how are you doing? And people do like to be asked. And like you said earlier, it doesn't introduce the idea, because if they're going to do it, it's already in their head. You can't introduce the idea in their head.
Yeah, there's a wonderful video that they show in the QPR training, and that's part of the information that's there. It's that it's people who have attempted suicide, and they're speaking very candidly about the importance of asking the direct question.
And they want you to ask them to show that you care, too.
Yeah, there's a passage where a gentleman says directly, somebody asked me if I was going to hurt myself, so I said no, because I was not going to hurt myself. I was going to kill myself. So really being able to have that direct conversation, to be able to hold that information and not be afraid to hear it, and then ultimately being able to direct those people that we love and care about to the proper treatment.
And knowing what to do, because if you feel like you don't know what to do, that R part, referring 988, that's the National Crisis Line. You can text that line, you can chat that line, you can call that line, and then of course in Georgia we have the Georgia Crisis Access Line as well.
Yeah, so great referrals opportunities to connect people. I think the really important thing here is just knowing that we can be there for each other. You don't have to be a professional. You don't have to be trained as a therapist. You can be a caring mom. You can be a teacher. You can be a community member. You can be a pastor or a lay person who wants to be a supportive person in someone's life, and you can connect to this QPR training, become equipped, learn the skills that you need to be able to be supportive in that moment, and then ultimately to get someone to care.
Yes, you can save a life and prevent suicide.
So ladies, one final question for the both of you that I'd love for you to answer. What would you say to someone who thinks that there is a certain face of suicide, that more groups are more likely than others? What would be your closing thought to dispel that myth?
It can attack anybody. Anybody can experience depression. Anybody can experience suicidal thoughts. It just really depends on our genetic makeup, family history, our experiences, our trauma, our stressors that we are exposed to. So it really can happen to anyone.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, to the top of the conversation, when we talked about risk factors, things like financial stress, job loss, loneliness, it can happen to anybody. So anyone who can experience emotional pain can have a battle with suicide. And so that's an important piece. This can be anybody, and anybody can help.
Thank you both so much for sharing your insight and reminding us that, that self-care is not selfish. And we want to remind you, at Chris 180, we are a wealth of information for you. So from finding a therapist to attending one of our free suicide Prevention Awareness Month trainings, we would love for you to connect with us. You can go on our website, chris180.org/QPR, to find a date that works well for you. And please spread the word and tell a friend. Also, if you or someone you know is considering suicide, please take action today. You can text the number 988, which is the National Suicide Prevention number, 988. Or if you're here in Georgia, you can call 1-800-715-4225 for the Georgia Crisis Line. Again, we thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, and we will see you next time.